In fighting games, it's only natural to seek out a top-tier character to master. After all, if you're going to dedicate many hours towards mastering a single character, it might as well be a strong one. When you're up against the world's best, the margins between victory and defeat are small, and wielding a powerful character is an obvious way to secure an advantage. But what about the players who opt for the road less traveled? What about the competitors who buck convention and devote themselves to becoming low-tier specialists? This is Anakin Liu. He's one of the world's best Tekken players, and he plays Jack 7.
I remember picking Jack up for the first time in Tekken 6. I was probably around like 18, 19 years old. Still kind of, I guess, up and coming player in my region. And I wanted to kind of prove that I was kind of the best in Atlanta, starting there, and then move on to the Southeast, and then eventually maybe took over the United States. I come from a city that has a long history of Tekken, a lot of legacy there, and a lot of old school Atlanta legends used Jack and did really well in tournaments. Jack is just a big giant robot at first glance. He's got really long limbs, namely his arms, so his punching attacks are really good for either getting in, because they can kind of slowly close in on the opponent, attack them at a range where opponent can attack you. He doesn't have hundreds and hundreds of moves like some of the characters do with multiple stances. He comes with a very basic tool set, and from there it's up to the player to kind of determine how they want to paint that blank canvas, how they want to use these attacks in their own way.
Like most fighting games, Tekken has the typical attack, block, throw game of rock, paper, scissors. Its system of high, mid, and low attacks adds another layer to the decision making on defense. A standing block will block high and mid attacks, but lose to lows. A crouching block will block low attacks and force high attacks to whiff, but get crushed by mid attacks. Jack might be lacking in moveset complexity, but he makes up for it with the way he can use his range to make that second layer of RPS that much more difficult for his opponents.
Low attacks are probably one of the best ways to get those small chippy damage points off your opponent's life bar slowly but surely. Unlike other fighting games, Tekken doesn't really have block chip damage, and that's where the lows come in. If you're playing somebody who's not willing to use lows, you can just hold back all day and you never lose life. So one thing about that is that you just have to get in position. So lows, if they had unlimited range, they would be overpowered. So the tricky part about using them effectively is getting in range and also avoiding your opponent's panic moves or their keep out attacks. Once they see you trying to get in range, another mix-up mind game begins. So picking up on the opponent's tendencies is important for kind of learning how to use lows and everything like that. When you're playing that neutral game where neither players are kind of attacking and they're just trying to look for the opening, Jack definitely has a big advantage because it's hard to close that distance in on him because he has that range. Once you move in, you're going to be vulnerable at a point where most characters aren't going to be able to be as effective as Jack. So that's one thing that I have going for me, and it allows me to play much more comfortable defense, knowing that it's going to be hard to get in. It's allowed me to focus more on making the right decisions over my opponents rather than, oh, does my character have these moves? How do my moves interact with the character's moves? I know Jack's range, I know his moves, they're very consistent, and it's something that I can count on, that if I play good that day, then I've got a shot against anybody.
Anakin's use of Jax's low attacks, like his machine gun fist, allow him to mitigate the superior movement of some of the game's faster characters. The damage might not look like much, but these pokes add up over the course of a round. But you can't get predictable. One of Anakin's fellow Atlanta players, American Whackdash, demonstrated the strength of sidesteps and low parries against Jack in their top 64 matchup at CEO, taking most of Anakin's health as punishment for 3 predictable lows. Low parries can be beaten by timing mix-ups, but at higher levels of play, Jack players need something to draw the opponent's attention upwards.
Okay, that's where the Jackhammer comes in. It's a very reliable, long range, fast, safe. It's a good move to condition the opponent to set the stage, kind of give a feeling. Sometimes you'll see me spamming a lot of lows, and that might seem like I'm just really focused on that. But what I'm trying to do is kind of annoy them enough to where I've got them thinking about defending against lows, and then I'll flip it up to Jackhammers. I just have to notice like how I'm making my opponent feel. I break it down in a way where it's very simple, but there are, again, other factors that are going on in the match as well, such as sidestepping and everything that you kind of got to keep under control. But in a nutshell, that's kind of what it is.
Beginning in 2017, the Tekken World Tour has become a banner for competitive Tekken players to rally under and compete to see who is truly the best player in the world. With the latest version of the tour kicking off at CEO 2022, Tekken players from all corners of the globe ventured to Daytona, Florida in the hopes of getting an early lead on qualifying points. The Jackhammer was a key aspect of Anakin's run. In his 4 top 8 sets alone, Anakin's Jack 7 threw 119 Jackhammers. Only 51 of those Jackhammers hit, a 42% rate, but almost every other time, the opponent was forced to block. And to truly understand the power of the Jackhammer, you have to understand the attention it demands. Anakin's first matchup of top 8 was against a former Tekken World Tour champion, Rangchu. Anakin hit 6 out of 9 jackhammers in Game 1 against Rangchu's Julia, dispatching it in a quick 4 rounds. Against Panda, Anakin would hit just 1 jackhammer, the second to last combo starter of a victorious round 1. Just over 20 seconds into the third and final round of the game, Anakin finally worked his way back into jackhammer range. Rangchu blocked every single one, but just watch his posture over the next few seconds. It's all standing blocks as his attention has been forced upwards by the onslaught of jackhammers. But then, the low rage drive catches Rangchu, setting the stage for the low poke to double KO and clinch the set and trip to winners finals. Waiting for Anakin was Book from Thailand, a formidable opponent who is considered the best in his country. Anakin and Book would collide twice at CEO 2022, both in the winners and grand final sets of the tournament where he would reset the bracket against Anakin and force him to dig deeper for answers if he wanted to take home the gold.
Book has been a dominant player in the scene for a while. Best player in Thailand, and I remember him competing when he was as young as maybe like 14, 15 years old. Now he's in his early to mid 20s, so he's actually got a lot of years of experience under him. And being the best player from your country, you carry a lot of pressure a lot of times, and he's been doing really well. And a lot of players in the circuit really respect him, and it just shows in his results. You know, being the champion of Evo Japan, he's even taken down players like Knee. I think when anyone comes across him, they definitely feel that threat. And at first he got me, but then the past few times I've been getting him. So actually going into CEO, even the winners finals, I was feeling pretty good. He chose Lydia, which was a side character of his. And again, I think that goes back to the history that we had. The last few times I played him, I'd beaten him when he had been using the character that he was known for, Jin. So I think he was pressured, or he got in his own head somehow and convinced himself that his side character might be something that was good enough to throw me off.
You want to talk about the jackhammer as a tone setter? Look no further than round 1 of winners finals. In a dominant 3-0 game 1, Anakin unleashed 14 jackhammers. Sure, he hit just 3 of them, a 21% success rate, but the fact that he was close enough to force Book to block was enough to enforce this pressure. Anytime Jack is in jackhammer range, the threat of the low poke exists as well, and against a player who mixes up as well as Anakin does, you can only guess right so many times. The ends of these 3 rounds show the illusion of choice presented by the jackhammer. You could try to outthink Jack's attempt to pull your attention high and keep blocking low, as Book did at the end of game 1, just to get opened up by a high jab into a final jackhammer to end it. Then you decide to play him straight up, keep your focus high. Boom, there's the low you thought was coming last round. And then, after a 20-second stretch of jackhammer free play in round 3, Book was caught off guard by the 14th one of the set. He was able to fight back a bit in the third game, but Anakin won 3-1. Much of that can be chalked up to his 15 successful jackhammers, an average of 1 per round. It's a set that proves success rate with the jackhammer isn't everything. Anakin only connected with 38.5% of his 39 jackhammers against Book in winners finals, but the attention that it demanded opened Book up for a variety of moves, from low pokes to subsequent jackhammers, as Anakin cruised over the DLC challenger.
Since it wasn't, I was able to take that handedly. Met again in grand finals, and he actually decided to bring out his main character. Jin is a very well-rounded character. When it comes to like general common tools that are really good in Tekken, Jin, in a way, kind of has it all, you know. And one of the main key attacks that he's had for a while is the electric, but his version is a little different. And that move has always been effective against the bigger characters because of how fast it is. Like every time you do certain attacks with Jin, you just know they're going to connect on Jack. So that was what I was having a hard time with when he had made the adjustments. He was being a little bit more aggressive, and during our neutral games, one thing that I've noticed is that usually my opponent lets me get in and initiate, which kind of spells beginning of the end for them, but he was meeting me halfway. He was more willing to break the ice as well. He's just, like I said, kept getting caught. I remember there being a lot of instances where we would meet with an attack and we trade, and it just so happened that in those situations, the trade works out in his favor.
Again, the jackhammers tell the story. Against Book's Akuma, Anakin hit 5 of 6 jackhammers and waltzed to a Game 1 victory. But as Book got his Jin legs back under him, Jin's threats, his electric and his parry, were able to prevent Anakin from using the jackhammer to control the pace of the match. In winners finals against Book's Lydia, Anakin threw 39 jackhammers across 14 rounds, an average of 2.78 per round. In games 2 through 4 of grand finals against Book's Jin, also a 14-round span, Anakin used just 24 jackhammers, just 1.71 per round, a drop of over 1 full jackhammer. It's not even about the hit rate. At 41.7%, it was actually better in the grand finals loss than it was in the winners finals victory. Because Anakin is so precise with his jackhammer spacing, rarely ever whiffing, his jackhammer usage rate becomes a proxy for how well he is establishing his zone. If you're allowing him to get close enough to let the jackhammers rip, it's already too late. Put Anakin on the defensive, and you've at least given yourself a chance.
A big part of his success was just being more aggressive, being more loose, and sometimes when you're down, that's when you're able to flip that switch. You be more carefree, and you never know what'll happen. I've been able to make comebacks just because I've had that mentality.
A few early jackhammers gave Anakin the lead early into the reset, but it wasn't until Game 3 that Anakin was finally able to re-establish the jackhammer pressure. After throwing just 7 jackhammers in the first 2 games, Anakin was able to find the space for 29 in the final 3 games, an average of just under 2 per round. With Book forced to consider the low kick before throwing out the electric, Anakin was finally able to gain some control over the pacing and spacing of the game. With Book on championship point and facing a life deficit, in part because of a rare whiff jackhammer earlier in the round, where did Anakin find his openings? From the lows, as he had done just enough to keep Book's attention on blocking high. And how better to seal the deal in the final round than with a huge conversion off a jackhammer trade, the last of the 51 he connected in CEO's top 8.
Oh, Anakin got it! Unbelievable! Anakin is your CEO 2022 champion!
When you're looking for those adjustments, I'd say that there never really is like one adjustment that just automatically turns the tide and wins the match for you. It's something that usually so small that creates like a break in their momentum, and from there you can kind of dig your way back into the match. That's what people don't realize, is that when you look for the adjustments, they're probably going for the gold a lot of times, and they don't realize that baby steps can actually help lead to the comebacks as well. We took it down to the very last hit, and it was an epic match for sure. I know he'll be looking for revenge.
Making a name for yourself in fighting games for most players means using the most powerful characters available. But as Anakin has proven time and time again, success can be found even in spite of a character's perceived ranking on a tier list. In Jack, Anakin has found a way to tame even the most powerful fighters on Tekken's roster, using Jack's simple and consistent tools to force his opponents to fight on his terms. Finding a character that resonates with you like Jack does with Anakin is one of the most beautiful things about fighting games, leading to a level of self-expression that is not only personally rewarding, but can also catapult you as a player to untold heights.